Hi there, it's Dr. Moby Motion. Now I really appreciated the response to my last video where I showed off this pill simulation. And as promised, because the video got over 200 likes, I'm going to be showing you exactly how I made it in this tutorial. Now if you'd like me to share the blend file that I make today, then check out this other video. I'll link it up there and down in the comments. And if you can get that video to 200 likes, I'll share the blend file for free for all my followers. So without further ado, let's get into this tutorial. So we've got a new Blender file. I've got screencast keys down here in the bottom left so you can see exactly what I'm doing. And we're going to leave the default cube actually. We'll be coming back to this. We're going to make a new sphere though, new mesh UV sphere. And we're going to grab it off in the x-axis by 5 and we'll look at it from front view. Now this sphere is going to be the basis for our pill. We are going to go into edit mode, wireframe, we'll press B to select a box and we'll delete this top half, but make sure you leave this middle ring and just zoom into this ring. We're going to select it with Alt and selecting. I'm using left mouse to select, but if you had the old right mouse click to select, you would use that instead. And now we're going to zoom into it and we want to scale it down just slightly so it lines up with this ring below it. So you can see what I mean. I'm going to press shift to make sure this is a really fine adjustment, and just there you can see that this line goes straight up and down. Now this is going to be the bottom half of our pill. To make the top half, we're going to add a mirror modifier. Mirror in the Z axis, not the X, and we'll go back into edit mode. Now again, we'll press B and select this bottom half of vertices. This time, again, you want to leave out the middle ring, make sure you don't select that. And now we're going to press G and Z to grab this downwards, and you can see it's looking like a pill. And we'll have this around there. Okay, perfect. Now we're going to untick merge because we want these two halves to behave differently. So if I show you a real pill, you can see the two halves are separate and one of them is actually inside the other. And we're going to get it to look a little bit like that. And to do that, we'll need to keep these halves separate. So untick merge. Now we have to leave edit mode to apply the modifier. And once we've done that, you can see these vertices are all real. So it's applied that mirror modifier to our pill. Now we're going to select half of our pill, make it slightly smaller, just like you can see there. Now you might think that's difficult because these vertices overlap, but there's a really cool trick. So you select any vertex in the bottom half, press Ctrl and plus, and this will expand the selection until you've selected just the bottom half. So we're going to leave edit mode and press Shift S. Now we're going to move the cursor to selected, and you can see the cursor is right in the middle of our pill now. And that's important because now we want to change the pivot point to the 3D cursor so that when we scale this down very slightly, it kind of aligns, and this is what you'd expect it to look like. So we're going to scale it down by pressing S and then 0.96, and that looks about right. The only problem with this, which you can see if you go into solid mode like this, is this gap. So these two sections aren't joined together. Now this is really easy to fix. We'll go back into wireframe mode to help us see this more easily. We'll select just this outer ring by pressing Alt and clicking, and then Alt Shift and clicking this, and it selects both the rings. Now we're going to use Blender's edge tools with Control E to bridge the edge loops, and you can see it's connected them. Now if we go back into solid mode, you can see that the two sections are connected as you'd expect. Great. So now we have our pill in its basic form. We're going to get started on the environment that we're going to use to move the pills around. So let's go back to our cube. We'll move this pill even more out of the way, let's say 25 more. We'll move the cursor back to the middle, and we'll add a circle. And we're going to scale this circle 16 times to make it nice and big, and we'll go into edit mode. Now we're going to go into front view, extrude it in the Z axis, and we'll do this about 12. No, that's too much. Let's move it up just there, and this is a total of 8. Now we want to fill the bottom so the pills don't fall out. You can do this just by pressing F, that fills the bottom, but I find the geometry isn't very good and you can get weird physics later on. So we're going to fill it by extruding and sizing down the extrusion to 0.6, and then if we press Shift R, that repeats that, and now we can press F and this will be okay. Now in front view, we'll go into wireframe mode, and we'll move this cube up so it sits just on the bottom of our container. Now we'll go into edit mode and scale our cube in the X axis. Let's say 14. So now it doesn't quite touch the edges, but it nearly gets to the edge of our container. And this cube is going to rotate to move our pills around. Now we're not going to keyframe this, we're going to use a really cool feature of Blender that lets you program in different movements very simply. So we select the cube, we go to Object Properties and Rotation Z, and we're going to type in #frame, and you can see it's moved. And now if we play our animation, you can see that it's going to move around by itself. Now it's moving too quickly, but we can adjust that really easily by doing frame divided by 100, and now it slows down the movement 100 times. So you can see you get a really nice smooth movement. Now one rod rotating around doesn't give enough movement. I want a kind of cross that will rotate around to move the pills around. And I'm going to do that super simply by duplicating this cube and offsetting it. So here, frame divided by 100. Now we're going to offset this by 1/4 of a turn, which is really easy to do. We just add pi over 2, which is equal to 45 degrees, and you get the offset. Now you have a cross that's moving around and it's going to move our pills around. Let's save our progress so we don't lose anything, and let's create a few thousand of these pills to make it more interesting. I'm going to leave this here in case we have to go back and make some changes. So I will duplicate it with Shift D and move it over here. It's way too big, so let's scale it to, first let's move this pivot point back to median point and scale it 0.4. And scale it 0.5. Now we have a good sized pill. Now we're going to move this to a corner. I want to make sure it's the same length across as it is down, and that'll make sense in a second. So I've moved it back to the middle. I'm going to move it, and you can watch in the top right there it says how much I've moved it. So in the x-axis I've moved it across 10, so now I'm going to move it down 10 in the y-axis, and now it sits exactly in the corner there, and that's great. I'll move it down slightly, and we're going to use an array to make a lot of these pills. So let's go to the array tab, add modifier array. You can see it's made 2 of them. We want more than that, so let's do 20. If we do 21, that works out nicely. And we're going to make a second array modifier. This time it's going to move it in the y-axis, and again we'll have 21. And you can see we made a large quantity of these pills. Now at this point you could add a third array and make more of the pills stacking on top of each other in the z-axis. But the reason I'm not going to do that is because I want to keep an eye on the number of objects in my scene. At the moment Blender still thinks this is one object. That's why in the bottom right it says one object is selected only. So I'm going to apply the modifiers and then use duplication to make the layers of pills, and that way I can keep track of how many objects are in the scene. So I'll apply this, then I'll apply this, and we have this array, but you can see it's still recognized as one object, so we still need to split these apart. We'll do that by going into edit mode, pressing A to select all, and now you go to mesh, separate by loose parts, and you can see the object numbers jumped up to 441 that we have selected here. So we have 441 capsules. We're going to do something now to save us a lot of render time, disk space, and it's going to make everything run more smoothly in the simulation as well. We're going to make these instances of the same object, so Blender doesn't have to calculate everything 441 times. We're going to tell Blender that these are the same pill, and that way it'll process everything much more efficiently. So first, object, set origin, origin to geometry. Now we're going to press Ctrl L to make links in object data. Now these are all going to be instances of the same object. Let's select this container, hide it with H for the time being, and we'll use this as a chance to make the materials on this pill, and you'll see that it'll set the material to all the pills, and that's how you know the materials are all linked, because the objects are linked. Let's focus in on this one pill. Let's go to material preview mode, and we're going to go to the materials tab, and we're going to make a new material. Now the base material we'll use as the orange, so let's just make it a bright orange for the time being to help us see what we're going to do. We're going to go into edit mode, wireframe, to select this bottom half. You can see it's selected the bottom half with all of them because they're the same object. And we're going to press Ctrl and plus just once to select the entire bottom half. And here we're going to press add. So it's going to make a new material for these. We'll go back to material preview. We'll assign this new material to these faces. And we'll call it blue. And we'll make this a nice blue color. You can see you've made the material for all the tablets. I'm going to play with this later, but this is the base we're going to use. So we have 400 tablets. Let's make at least a few thousand. Let's move this light out of our way. Let's go back into wireframe mode and select all the tablets. I'm going to miss the camera, so I don't select that. Now you would usually duplicate with Shift D, but that doesn't keep the links that we've made. That's going to make our scene run more efficiently. Instead of Shift D, we're going to use Alt D, and now it's made a linked duplicate. And we're going to move this up in the Z axis, just above the first ones. Now we press Shift R to repeat that, and as I do this, I'm keeping an eye on this object count. Let's do 2000, and if we need more, we can add more. So this will do for the time being. And we have all our pills. Let's select our camera, which can be tricky. I'm going to select it from here instead, and we'll move it out of our way. And I'll press Alt H to bring the box back. And now we're ready to add the physics into our scene. Let's select all the pills, unselect the container by pressing Shift and clicking it twice. And you can see we only have the pill selected. Now we're going to select one of these pills to make sure That is the active object. And we'll go into the physics settings right here. Rigid body. We're going to keep these as active. Let's bring the weights down. Let's bring the mass down to 1 gram. And we're going to, and this is super important, we're going to change the collision shape from convex hull to capsule. And this is going to make sure it runs super efficiently. We can leave the rest of the options as default. And if we zoom back in, you can see this object changed shape slightly because the physics is now being applied to this. It's not being applied to the other pills yet. We're going to fix that by going to Object, Rigid Body, Copy from Active. And now it's going to take the physics settings from that one active element and apply it to all the rest of the pills. This takes a little bit of time because it's taking those same properties and applying them to every single pill. So we're going to have a little bit of patience while it does that. So now it's finished copying over the physics properties. You can select any one of these objects, any one of these pill objects, and you can see that it has the same properties as before. So it's active, it's 0.000, it's a gram, it's a capsule shape, and that's the same for any of the pills. And now if you press space, it will simulate our scene and you can see the pills will fall. But we haven't set the properties yet for the container, and that's why it fell straight through. So let's select our container. We're going to add a rigid body property to it. This is going to be passive, which means it's not going to move. It's not animated. The shape, we want it to be a mesh. Now this is not efficient, but it's the only way to get that convex kind of shape which we want for the container. Now if we press enter, you can see our pills fall and they'll collide with our container and they'll stay inside. They're still not reacting to these, let's call them stirrers, so that's what we'll add next. So select one of them, rigid body. We'll keep it passive because we don't want it to fall around in the scene, but we're going to take animated and we'll change shape to box because box is much more efficient. We'll do the exact same for the other stirrer, rigid body, passive, animated, and box. Now let's look at our scene from a slight angle like this. Let's go to solid view. Let's save our progress in case the simulation crashes Blender. Let's get a slightly more top-down view so we can see what's happening. And let's run the simulation. So it's a bit slow to start, they're just crumbling into place. But you can see as it goes on, these stirrers are moving the pills around and you get the same kind of satisfying movement that I had in the original clip. Perfect. Let's go to our camera. Let's select our camera as well. I'll do that from up there. The camera properties. And I want it to zoom in a little bit more, 85 millimeters. Ooh, actually that's a bit too much. 75, and that works well. And let's look at a preview of this render. Now we're currently using Eevee, which I personally am not a big fan of. Let's switch back to cycles. Yes, and you can see the lovely realistic material that it applies there. It's got a wireframe to save my computer. Now there's just a few things left that'll help us polish off this scene, and those are the materials, the lighting, and the camera effects. So we're going to start with the materials. Let's open up a new section of our Blender window. Here we'll go to Shader Editor. We'll select one of these pills, and now we can edit the nodes of this material. Now we're going to go into this shader, and we're going to make our material nice and plasticky. So we're going to increase the specular to 0.9. We'll reduce the roughness to 0.05, and we'll just play with this orange material so it's nice and bright. And you can see it gives our pills a nice shiny orange material. Now we're going to do something similar for the blue material. We're going to select it from down here, Again, we'll increase the specular to 0.9, decrease the roughness to 0.1, and you can see the blue is also nice and shiny now. Now our materials look a bit odd, and that's because this geometry here, right in the middle, where the two ends of the capsule meet, is a bit odd, so we're going to fix that. We're going to go into edit mode on any one of our pills, and we'll press Ctrl R to make a ring cut in the bottom half of the capsule, and we'll move it up very close to this seam between the two capsules, and we'll apply it there. You can see the bottom half now looks much better than the top half, and we'll do the same thing on the top. So Ctrl R to make a ring cut, move it down very close to the seam, as close as you can. And even this first one, we're going to move it even closer. So select it with Alt, click, grab it in the Z axis. We'll use Shift to get it nice and precise, and we'll leave it there. Now, we'll go back to our camera. We'll go run the simulation again to get some nice movement in there. And we'll go to rendered, and you can see the pills look much better. Now a few things. We're going to press Alt H to make sure everything's back in the scene. We're going to go here into rigid body world, cache. We'll extend it a little bit, 500, to make sure we get a nice long scene. We'll make sure the blender scene also goes to 500, and we'll bake the simulation. You can see the progress there. This is pretty fast. And the reason it's fast is because we set the collision shape to capsule. If it was the default, which is convex hull, or if it was mesh, it would be much less efficient. Cool, and that's done. Now we can go to any frame. Let's go to the last one with Shift and right arrow. And the simulation is ready baked for us there. So now let's fix the lighting and the camera. First thing we'll do is select this light. I don't like it being behind the camera. It looks a bit odd. So I'm going to move it to the other side. And if we get a top view, I want it right opposite the camera, around there. Now let's render again. Let's get this preview. And you can see it's much darker because I moved it further away. But I like the reflections where they are now. We're quickly going to press Ctrl B and draw a box around here. And that way we only render what's in the middle, and that'll speed up our renders. Now, the light is still selected. Let's go to the light settings here. Turn up the brightness. Let's try 10,000. That's much better already. I'm also going to increase the size to make the shadows and the reflections softer. So instead of 0.1 meters, let's try 1 meter or 5 meters. Nice. We're getting some really good reflections here. It's still a bit dark, and I'm going to do what I did in the original scene, which is to add an area light, grab it up, and we're going to make this really big. So 5 meters, nope, even bigger, 10 meters. And you can see it's starting to soften up the lights there, but it's still really dim. So let's try 1000 watts, and there you go, it's starting to look good. Now this is the lighting setup I had in the original scene, but I think we can do better. We're going to change it to ellipse, and we're going to change this to 10, so it's 10 on both sides, it's a circle. And this should soften up the corners of the reflections. And you can see it's done that there. And we're very close to being done. Let's just add some depth of field to this scene. Select the camera, make sure you're in the camera settings, tick depth of field, and now reduce this f-stop. Let's try 1.8, 1.4. This is the most you could get with most real cameras. Let's reduce it even more. Let's say 0.9. This is not a real camera, so we can afford much more expensive lenses than we could otherwise. 0.4. These lenses don't even exist. But you can see we're starting to get this lovely depth of field in the scene. I'm going to move the distance up slightly to about 12. And we're done. All you have to do with your scene is render it out as an animation, and you'll have this lovely, satisfying animation of pills moving around. You can also try different angles. So the one we used was the tight angle, but you can have a nice wide angle like this that lets you see more of the pills. You can have a top-down view like this. There's lots you can do to play around with the scene. You can try different colors of the pills. That's something I didn't do yet. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. If you want the blend file that I created, make sure to check out this other video that I'll link above and down below, and give it a like. If that video reaches 200 likes, I'll share those files. Leave a comment down below. What video tutorial would you like to see next? Subscribe for more, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Now, this tutorial is based on this super satisfying simulation by Dr. Tomtron, who very kindly gave me permission to make this tutorial based on his animation. I'll have some of his links down in the description below and on screen now, so check those out to see his work.